Alright, let's continue on and unwrap the lower sheath here. So I'm going to first start with the cap right here. Let's go ahead and isolate that. Looks like we were in isolation, so I'll isolate it again here. And let's go start by removing this geometry that we don't need. And then I'm going to do a reset X forms on this. Convert it to editable poly. And then I'm going to go to unwrap here and select all these faces and do a flat mapping. Now I'm going to weld this band up here together. So I'm going to grab this edge, hit Shift S and Shift S like so. And then what we want to do is just kind of split this guy right down the middle, about like that. So we'll break it, and then I'm going to go ahead and straighten selection. Okay, and that should be unwrapped like that. And I'm going to convert that to an editable poly. And let's go on to the next piece. Okay. So we'll work on this piece next. And if you have that issue where your camera's not really rotating around an object, if you just select it and hit Z, that'll focus on the object. So if I was deselecting it, it's still selecting it, but before I was having a hard time moving, panning left and right, because I think it was still focused on this object. But that's just an easy way to kind of make sure your camera orbits around the object. So let's go ahead and isolate this piece. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the geometry we don't need. And one other thing I wanted to mention too is if we look right down the center of this, typically you would want, for a piece like this, you'd want a segment going right down the middle. So that way we could, kind of like we did on the blade, we could mirror. So we'd unwrap one side and then mirror it over to this side, and then we'd be utilizing our texture space a lot better. So in this case, now we're stuck in a scenario where we have to have both sides of the sheath as unique UV shells. With that said, though, we do have this detail here that's not actually on this side. So however we look at it, I think we'd still be stuck in a scenario where we have to have two unique pieces. So let's go ahead and reset its X forms, convert to editable poly, and while we're here, let's go ahead and check the back face culling. Make sure our normal facers are facing out the correct direction. Looks like they are. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. Okay, and then let's go ahead and throw a unwrap modifier on here. Okay. Select all these faces and let's do a flatten mapping. Okay, that did a pretty good job for us. Let's go ahead and maximize this. I think these little bits right here are the pieces that make up the little hook right here. So what I'll do is just kind of let's grab everything here that's kind of a solid piece. Go into element mode. Bring that up, and then I'm going to grab all these pieces here and temporarily just pack them together, just so that we can kind of keep them together as we're unwrapping. So I think for this piece, we should be able to get away with just a straighten selection. That should straighten it out pretty nicely for us. However, with this piece, because we have these holes right here, I think the straighten selection feature is not going to produce very good results. Let's go ahead and just test it and see what happens. Yeah, you can see it just doesn't know how to straighten that piece. So we're going to have to straighten this piece by hand. So let's start by, just like with the blade, let's go ahead and position these roughly in place to where it's more or less straight. And this piece right here, you can see it kind of is all tilted. So what I'll do for that is just click rotation and just kind of, looks like I have rotation snap on, but that's okay. Well, Actually, I think I want to turn that off. So just check that off. Let's undo and just kind of rotate this to where it's more or less straight. Something like that. And we'll have to readjust these ones to be a little straighter to that piece. Okay, and let's continue down the line. And because I'm screen capturing, I think some of the issues I've been having in Max are related to that. Like as you can see, as I'm like kind of panning to the right, there's a bit of screen tearing. So if you see that in the video, that's what's going on there. And it's usually when I do a pretty, yeah, you can see how it just stutters there a little bit. Yeah, Radeon needs to fix that pronto. I need some Prime Video recording. Okay, move that up. Alright, so we have a piece like that. And it's really chugging. Okay, so let's go into edge mode now. I'm going to do an edge loop selection. And we don't want this edge loop that goes in here, so we're going to deselect that. Grab these edge loops. And then we're going to hit X. It's going to straighten it out horizontally, just that edge. And we'll leave that the way it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab all the way up to here. Now let's go ahead and first start by selecting the edge loops this way, because we know that there's no other pieces like this that will interfere with our edge loop. So I'm going to double click here. That'll be that piece, and then I'm going to grab this over here. So we have a selection that looks like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit X again and move this piece up a little bit like that. And try to establish, so we can see our thickness right here. That's about the width we need for these pieces. So I'm going to kind of try to keep that thickness on this piece. So we'll start, do the same thing on this one. Let's do an edge loop selection this way. Deselect that. Grab this over here. Hit X to mirror horizontally. And that piece is going to work just the way it is right there. We also might want to grab, let's go into vertex mode here. Grab all this here and move it up to about like that. And let's continue on here. So let's do an edge loop selection. Let's go this way first, then grab these ones manually. Horizontally flatten that. Might want to actually make them a little thicker, just looking at this. So I'm going to grab this piece here, edge loop select that. And then we can maybe just grab this top here. Make sure we grab these edges and pull those up a little bit, like so. Okay. So let's continue on with this piece here, or segment. Make sure we don't select that, and set X. And we'll just keep continuing on with this. So we'll bring that up. Actually, yeah, we can do that. We'll bring it up like this to about that correct. You know, I just realized we didn't grab this in here. So let's grab that. Bring it up to about there. Then I'm going to do an edge loop selection in here and bring this. Let's grab that whole the border edge in there. Is that grabbing that piece? Yeah, that's grabbing it. Okay, we'll bring it up like that. Alright, so that's pretty straight. These ones should be pretty straightforward. We should be able to just double click them, hit X to straighten them, and then just reposition them. Did I not? I must not have got that piece. Thought I did. Alright, that's pretty good. So now it's pretty straight. Let's go through and align these vertically now. I'm thinking maybe we want to maybe attach these pieces first before doing the vertical alignment. Let's go ahead and check our texture, see if we have any texture distortion on this. And the scale of the checkerboard is pretty large. So one thing you can do is you can either just scale up your UVs in the UV space, but that they're already fairly large. We don't really want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily create a material. So go to standard, just create a standard material, and we can just call this UV checker. And then let's click our diffuse button here and map a checker pattern in there. And then let's click this button so it shows on our material. And I'm going to apply that to this object. Let's make sure that let's go ahead and convert. Now that should work, actually, just going out of UV editor. Okay, so now let's grab, so now we have our texture or material mapped to this, and it has the checkerboard pattern, but it's way too large in scale. So I'm going to increase the tiling values until we get a pretty good tile value. So I'm going to start maybe with 20. And see, that kind of gives us a better checkerboard to kind of read if we've had any distortion in our mesh. And it looks pretty good. You could also increase this maybe to 40, and that gives you a much smaller checkerboard, so you can really start to see the checkers. But I think that's going to work for us. So we'll have that material available for us when we need to use it. But I'm going to go ahead and just put our default material back on here. And let's go and jump back into UV editor. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and try to weld some of these pieces together. So let's just go into edge loop mode here. And we can see that that edge corresponds up here. Not sure what's going on. What do we have here? That's strange. Now let's just try welding some of these pieces together. So I'll hit Shift S to move that, like that. That piece will connect there, and this piece will connect here. But we have, oh, I see what's going on. See, that's kind of horizontally the opposite direction, so it connects up here. These segments, so it should. Yeah, it just corrects that for us when we do Shift S. So at this point, let's go ahead and straighten some of these edges out. So I'm going to go into vertex mode and grab this, and I believe we want Y. Yep, vertical is Y. So we'll go through here and straighten this out. That probably needs to come more like that. And try to get this same distance on this side. So something like that. And let's keep going down the line here. So now what I'd like to do is, because this is such a large piece, let's go ahead and break it up into more smaller pieces. So let's go into face mode here and maybe come in about here. Yeah, that's about right. So it's about equal thirds now. Go ahead and break that and stick it over here, about like that. Okay, so we got that piece unwrapped. Now that leaves this piece right here. So let's see how we can unwrap that. Might want to just do, yeah, I think what we'll do is maybe let's do a quick planar map on it in Y, selecting all those faces. It's going to look bad like that. Let's go ahead and we don't need to really worry about that. And I'm going to use a new way of unwrapping this. I'm going to go ahead and go down to our seams, and I'm going to click on point-to-point seams, and then I'm going to start kind of creating a seam along this segment here, or edge loop. And this is basically telling Max that we want to create a seam on this edge loop. So you once you complete the seam, just right click and that creates the seam for us. And then I'm going to grab this side, make a seam here. And you could actually skip, like you don't have to click each individual segment. So I could come up to here and do that. But if you have like really a high tessellated model, it's better just to kind of go in and click each segment, because sometimes it'll cross over, like it'll come over here and try to, let me see if I can show you that. Yeah, it would do something like that if you go a little too far with the selection. So I'll undo that and just finish this guy off. And then we can just do a quick peel, and you can see how that basically separated that out for us. Let's see, show you that a little better. So we've got our top piece right here, and then the inner piece in here. And it does a pretty good job unwrapping it. A little bit of distortion. So we could straighten this piece out, but because it is kind of round, I mean, it just really won't play nice with us if we straighten this too much. It might be best to keep. Let's see how it plays. Let's see if we do a straighten selection on that. Yeah. Let's see here. If we scale upward like that, it starts to introduce some distortion in there. And there's not too good. This definitely looks a little odd. Let's see if we do a relax until flat. Yeah, I think I'll leave it about like that. So it's a combination of straighten selection and relax until flat. So we got a nice edge along here. So what we could do is grab this edge loop here, and I'll just click this vertical line, just get that straight, and then we'll have a nice straight edge when we need to arrange these. So let's go ahead and move this guy out of the way. That guy's good. And then we have this piece here, and that's pretty straight for the most part. So I'll go ahead and just let's see if we can do like a straighten selection on it. So we're in face mode. Let's take a look. That looks pretty good. That one played nice. So I'm going to go ahead and do a rescale elements on everything now. And that didn't really organize it very well for us. So I'm going to go ahead and scale all of this down. Make sure we don't have anything out here. Let's go into our freeform mode and just scale it down. And space these out the way they were. It really doesn't matter at this point, but just for clarity, I'm going to go ahead and just organize this a little better. Alright, so that piece is now unwrapped. I'm going to convert to edible poly, go out of isolation mode, and now all that's left is this wrapping here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break here, and we'll jump back into it and unwrap the rest of that. Alright, let's continue on. Let's take a closer look at these pieces here. If you remember correctly, when we built them, we built them to be symmetrically mirrored over. So knowing that, we can detach this side and then unwrap this and then mirror our UVs over. So let's go ahead and get those prepared. So I'm going to start with this piece here. I'm going to go into polygon mode, and we can go ahead and isolate it. And I'm just going to delete, I'm going to not delete, but I'm going to grab this side here, and I'm going to hit detach, like that. Then I'm going to go into our material editor and grab our mirrored UV material there, and jump back out of isolation mode, and we're just going to do this for each of these pieces. Oh, wrong side. Not sure why I have this up. Let's go ahead and redock that piece or panel. And once you get the hang of this, it's really not too necessary to do it for all these pieces. I'm just doing it for the tutorial, just so there's some clarity there. But once you kind of get used to unwrapping, you'll just know that this side is going to be your mirrored UVs. So we'll just continue on doing it this way. I'm just going to leave my material editor up. Not sure why I keep closing it. Alright, and one more piece here. Alright, and let's also think about some of these other pieces that are symmetrical. I believe this piece is symmetrical too, so I'll go ahead and throw our mirrored UVs material on that. This one should be 2. These two pieces are unique. This one is unique as well because we had to adjust the FFD. However, we might be... No, we'll just go ahead and make that piece unique. Just because if we mirrored this piece over to this side, we'd have to rebuild the high poly and then put the FFD back on there. That's an option if you want to do it, but just to keep this easy, I'm just going to keep that as a unique piece. This piece right here should be the same on both sides, so I'll make that unique. Or sorry, not unique, but a mirrored UV. Okay. And this, let me just check here. We've got our high on our low layer. Let's go ahead and make sure that piece makes its way into the correct layer. So I'm going to add that to our high poly layer. So we're now only looking at low poly. Okay, so I think what we should start with, let's go ahead and attack this piece right here. Let's go ahead and isolate that. And this looks like it would be a lot of work to unwrap, but I feel like with the flat mapping, it's going to make pretty easy work. Could be wrong, but let's go ahead and see. So let's start by first reset XForm, convert to editable poly, object properties, and check for backface culling. We're good on that. And since we don't have any open edges to see through, we'll just go ahead and keep backface culling on. And let's go ahead and throw an unwrap modifier on here. Select all these polygons and do a flatten mapping. Okay, so we're left with something like that. So we should, in theory, be able to grab this. It's going to make a very long piece, but it should straighten. Yeah, it did straight. Yeah, it's going to make a pretty long piece. Let's go ahead and move that up. I'm going to grab this piece, do the same. And you can tell that this is slightly distorted, so I'm going to go ahead and scale vertically until it's about the same thickness as this piece. And let's go ahead and check the checkerboard on that. Looks pretty good. And again, if this checkerboard's too large to check, you can always use your UV checker material. So we could go ahead and just throw that on there. So now we can kind of get a better idea of how this part is dealing with distortion. Looks pretty good. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and keep that on there. And we have these little bits right here. Let's see what those belong to. Okay, they're just end pieces and a piece in there. So what I'll end up doing, so let's go ahead and just weld everything here together. Let's go ahead and open this up. And I'm going to go in edge mode, hit Shift S. And I might just grab these smaller pieces and just keep welding them until we don't have any more. Okay. So something like that. That kind of did some odd right there. Let me just double check this piece. Don't want to scale, I want to move it. Let's do a flatten, straighten selection on that. Oh, I had two pieces on top of it. That's what I was looking at. Okay. So this piece right here, when we did our straighten selection, it distorted our UVs. So we could maybe, the easiest solution would be just to take this over here, get it about in the, get it about in the middle. And we'll switch it to scale horizontally, and then just scale this piece till it's to where it's the same width as that piece, more or less. So something like that. Okay. And so now we have all these pieces. Let's go ahead and rotate these. And let's try to, I think that's going to work. That length, so I'm going to go ahead and break this one to about the same length as those. So we get about right there. We deselect this guy right here and then do a break and then rotate it. Okay. So now we've got this long piece down here. Excuse me. So what I want to do is break this into thirds. So I'll come in about right here. And the nice thing about the way we're texturing this is we don't really need to be too concerned with our seam placement, although it is good practice to kind of, hide your seams where the camera is not going to see them. But in our case, it's not going to be an issue. So like, for instance, like we'd probably want to put a seam on this natural edge right here, which there already is one. So putting seams in kind of areas like right here that's kind of tucked behind there, it's just going to produce better results when it comes to rendering. So I'll go ahead and break this one out. And back in more traditional days of modeling and texturing, there weren't programs like Substance Painter, ZBrush, or Mudbox, so everything had to be done in Photoshop. And you still do work in Photoshop, but having programs that paint over seams so you get a nice seamless transition makes the whole texturing process a lot faster. So I'll go ahead and break this guy more or less into thirds. Okay. Let's just kind of resituate these guys. And that's going to do it for that piece. So we have something like that. One thing we could do though is rescale elements. Make sure all of our UVs are 1:1. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next piece. Let's convert this to an edible poly. And let's go ahead and just attack all these pieces in here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and reset X forms on this. Convert to edible poly and check for inverted normals. Looks like we already had that one on. It's interesting. Okay. It looks good. So let's go ahead and throw unwrap on here. Grab all of our faces. And do a flat mapping. Okay, we'll grab this side piece right here. And do a straighten selection. Same for this one. And I'm not sure why. I mean, that piece was identical to this piece, but it still made this one shrink. So that's just max being max, I guess. So we're going to just kind of scale this to the correct width of this piece. It doesn't have to be too perfect. So that's going to work for us there. And then let's just go ahead and jump out of element mode here and weld this together. So I'm just going to grab these pieces and make sure they're all solid. Or one piece rather. Okay, let me grab this here. Alright. And I'm actually going to just make this one piece and then try to break this up equally. So I'm going to grab, let's go back into element mode, rotate this on its side, jump out of element mode, go into face mode, and kind of make a break to where that's equal halves. And then we have those pieces like that. Let's move these down. Let's do a rescale elements. So everything's 1:1. And let's check. We'll just use our UV checker here on this piece. And it looks pretty good. Little distortion there. Not sure if we can do much. That's just kind of how the way the straighten modifier, because these are kind of at an angle and it's straightening these pieces. It shouldn't be too apparent, so we're going to go ahead and leave that. call this piece good. Convert to editable poly. Okay, and let's start addressing some of these pieces. Okay, so we got this piece here. Go ahead and isolate it. And we really don't. Let's take a look at this. You're never going to see that polygon, and you're never going to see the one that's buried inside here. So we can delete these. And let's do a reset X form on it. Go to object properties. Check for backface culling. Looks good. Okay. And you could either keep that on or leave it off, but I find that it's just, when you have it on, it's just hard to make selections. So I just use it as a way to kind of proof and make sure that we don't have any inverted normals, and then turn it off. Okay. So let's go ahead and throw an unwrap modifier on it. Select all these faces. Do a flatten mapping. Okay, and we're left with a piece like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just in the viewport here, I'm going to weld them up from here. So now that's one piece. Then we have this inner piece. And to be honest, you're really not even seeing that. But the problem is if we remove these faces in here, the camera might, some of these knots aren't completely like touching in here, so you want to be able to see some geometry in here. So we might just leave those, and maybe we won't dedicate as much resolution to these inner pieces, so maybe we'll shrink them down and place them in kind of like this unique area in our final layout. But we'll just let's just unwrap them for the time being. Okay, so a piece like that. Alright, and let's go ahead and weld these. And I'm just going to use the viewport. And what do we have here? That's a piece right there that belongs there. So now we have these two pieces. Let's kind of move these out of the way, separate them a little bit. Ooh, looks like we welded that. We didn't want to do that, so we can just go click that edge. Sure, we're out of element mode, and just go ahead and break it. And you can A for element mode. It's a little quicker way of getting the element, so you don't have to keep going down here and clicking it. And I don't know, I think, let's see how a flatten map, straighten selection works on this piece. Yeah, that doesn't really, unfortunately, I think we're in a scenario where with these pieces we really just need to leave them unstraightened, which is going to not be too great when it comes to positioning these, because they're very abstract pieces, but we'll just have to work with that. So one thing we can do is we can align areas that are straight. So like this piece up here, it's kind of at an angle. We can straighten that, and to do that we can just grab that edge, make sure we're not in element mode. Let's close our material editor and open text tools, and then use the align feature. So now we have a nice straight edge up there, and maybe do the same for this one, and we'll call that piece done. Convert that to an editable poly. And let's move on to this next piece. So we'll delete the faces we don't see. Reset X forms. And I feel like this video is going to be a little bit longer, but I think I'm going to extend it past. Actually, some of these videos have been quite long, but I just want to kind of cover all these parts in one video so we don't have too many videos. So let's go ahead and continue here. I'm going to unwrap, grab the faces, mapping, flat mapping. Okay. just like we did before. We're just going to sew these. You can see we have visible seams right here. It's just a lot easier than going in here into the UV editor and trying to match them up. Just go here, select the seam that you want to weld, and then Shift S. There we go. Alright, and then we have this piece down here. And what's this guy right here? That's just select the polygon face. Oh, it's an inner. There we go. So we have all those pieces together. Let's go ahead and just do a rescale elements. And I'm going to go ahead and let's just pack together and then do rescale elements again. That's another easy way to kind of reorganize the scene if you don't want to go through all of that. And let's go ahead and straighten these pieces here. And this one, let's check our UV. Looks pretty good. And let's make use of our alignment feature. So we'll select that straight edge that we have there. Same for this one. These look pretty straight, but I'm going to go ahead and do them anyways. And that's going to do it for that piece. Let's go ahead and move on to this next piece. So this big knot right here. Okay, we can start by deleting these polygons. And we'll do a reset selected, convert to editable poly. And that looks good. Okay. Go ahead and unwrap this. That's a lot of pieces. So go ahead and just go in the viewport here and start welding some of these pieces up. Oop, don't crash on me, Max. And Max decided to crash on me. Okay. Alright, we're back after Max decided to crash on me. But it's always important to have the auto back feature enabled, because as soon as that crashed on me, I was able to save a file backup, which is nice, so I didn't lose all this work. So make sure you check that off or look into that on your preferences. That's a nice feature to have enabled. I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. And the reason why it crashed, by the way, is I selected an edge that didn't need to be seamed or welded. And for some reason, when you do that, it crashes Max. So make sure you carefully pick these seams when you're working out of the viewport and stitching them. Otherwise, you'll have that same issue I just had. So I'll go ahead and weld this piece here. I'm going to turn on wireframe so I can look through geometry and turn, let's see. There we go. It's a little easier to see seams if you turn off your wireframe. It just shows all the visible seam lines. So I'm going to go ahead and just weld some of these up. Got that piece in there. And you can see how this kind of makes a little more easier work than being here in the UV editor and doing this. Got some in here. One right there. And that's fine. Got that one here. Okay. So that looks pretty good. So we've got these little loop-de-loop pieces, but we can just take advantage of our straighten selection. That's going to straighten that piece out for us. And let's grab this piece here. Looks like somehow one of these got welded right here. Let's make sure we're out of element. Just hit A, go to edge mode, and make sure deselect it. I was in freeform mode, so I was selecting a box. Let's go ahead and break that right there. And let's enable element mode again. Grab this piece, pull it up, and straighten selection. Somehow I just went out of isolation mode, so I'll enable that again. And let's check see how our texture is applying here. Looks pretty good. A little distortion in here. We could try doing a quick peel on these pieces. Yeah, that helps kind of relax those pieces a little more. So I'll go ahead and just do that for each of these. Okay. And we're left with some very tough pieces that we're going to have to figure out how to organize, but that's just the nature of this. So let's go ahead and break this. I think we could get away with just making these two pieces, so I'm going to do that. And maybe just rotate that like so. Okay. Let's go ahead and rescale elements too. Double check our widths. Those are not too bad. Okay. Go ahead and call it good on this piece. Convert to editable poly. And let's move on to the next piece. So we've got this piece here. Reset X forms, convert to editable poly. And let's turn back face culling on. That looks good. I'll just go ahead and leave that one on. The back face culling on. Select all these polygons. And we're having that issue again where you can't see your selection. So if you hit F2, it should show the selection, but it's not. Very interesting. Let's delete that unwrap. Make sure we have the edit poly stack, the top of the stack selected, and then put an unwrap on it. And let's see if we have that same issue. Very interesting. That right there is just a glitch, because you can also even see our wireframe is not even visible there. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here and probably restart Max and see if that'll address that problem we're having here. Alright, so I restarted Max, and sure enough that was able to resolve the issue. Not sure what caused that, maybe like some memory leaking or something. So let's go ahead and continue on here. I'm going to go ahead and select all these polygons and do a flat mapping. Okay. Go into our viewport, weld these up. Looks like we got all those pieces. It looks like we're missing that piece right there. Okay, and we'll do, let's go into element mode just by hitting A. And I'm going to quick peel these pieces right here. And then flatten map these. Or straighten selection. Okay. And let's check our checkerboard. Looks pretty good. Okay. Let's maybe do a rescale elements. Make sure everything's uniform. And convert that to poly. And let's move on to the next piece. Oh, there's some, yep, we getting some screen tearing there. Let's go ahead and isolate this and delete the polygons and hope for not a crash. Sorry, got a little ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and reset the X forms. Check for backface culling. This might seem a little like overkill, but right there, see, we just caught a piece that's wrong. So we need to address that and flip it. That's the whole reason we check. So let's go ahead and unwrap this and continue on here. Let's do a flapping mapping. I think I like that better. Flatten mapping. There we go. And let's start welding some of these pieces together. And again, you can turn off wireframe and just see the visible edges. Looks like we got most. Yeah, we can also just look in here. That will tell us. Yeah, we got all of it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into element mode here. Grab this piece here, do a quick peel, and quick peel here. And then let's go ahead and straighten this guy. And when you use the straighten selection, you always want to make sure you're in face mode. It only works in face mode. So just double check that you're working out of that. And then we'll rescale elements. I'm not going to worry too much about getting these pieces aligned, because we can do that when we lay it out. And actually, I take that back. Getting this straight here, these pieces straight, will save us a little time when we do our final layout. So let's go ahead and take the time to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and let's disable element mode, open up our text tools, and just quickly align those like that. And we'll call that good. All right. So we've got these pieces. So let's kind of take these pieces out that we know are going to be mirrored. So what I'm going to do is just actually, no, we're not going to do that, because we need to lay out our final layout before adjusting these pieces. If we did that now, we'd have to just redo everything again. So disregard what I just said there. And let's continue on. So we've got all these pieces here unwrapped. That leaves these guys up here. So let's go ahead and start on this one. All right. Let's see. So let's do a reset X form, convert to editable poly, and kind of want to just double check this real quick. So we're never going to see, well, you kind of see it right there, but it's really not going to be, you'd really have to get in there to see that piece. So we'll just go ahead and remove this polygon here. All right, and let's check for backface culling. Piece looks good. Go ahead and unwrap. Turn our wireframe back on. And we got pretty lucky with that piece because it did most of it for us. So a little bit of cleanup. Let's go into element mode here, face mode, and do a quick peel on these. And then grab these and just straighten selection, and this one did a little weird, came out a little weird, so I'm going to scale that up vertically to about the thickness of that piece right there. Go up a little bit more, something like that. Okay. And let's go ahead and just kind of get these aligned a little better. Make sure we're not an element. Align. and align. There we go. And actually, I want to look at this piece. Okay, we missed this piece. That's fine. We can just weld that real quick and do a quick peel again on it. Make sure we select that whole shell when we do the quick peel. And just make sure we're at element and align. And then rescale elements. There we go. Let's check the texture on there. Looks pretty good. So we'll call that piece finished. So at this part in the video, my mic stopped working. So we'll go ahead and just do a voiceover for this part. So I've isolated that piece now, deleting that polygon that's not going to be visible and resetting its X-forms and converting it to an editable poly. Now I'm checking for back face culling, make sure we don't have any inverted normals, and we'll continue with unwrapping it. So we'll just go ahead and select all the faces and do a flat mapping. And now I'm just welding some of the seams. And it's a lot easier to work in the viewport for this sometimes, just because you can see them a lot easier. Okay, looks like we got all of our seams addressed, and now we're going to go ahead and straighten those pieces. And then apply a quick peel on those just to kind of relax them a little bit. And it looks like at this part we had a little bit of an issue with the pieces not being the same width, so we're just addressing that by scaling that smaller piece out a little bit. Actually, it looks like we're going to be using a vertical line to make sure that they are the same width. And then we're just checking for any distortion by turning on our checkerboard pattern. And we just did a rescale elements to make sure all of our UVs are 1-to-1. I think right here, I'm trying to select one of those edges and then use text tools to align that shell a little bit better. So that's going to go ahead and do it for that piece. Go ahead and move on to the next one. So we're just looking it over and deciding if we're going to be able to see that polygon that we want to remove. Looks like we did a reset X-forms on it now, and checked for back face culling, and this is where we remove that polygon. And we're selecting all the faces and doing a flat mapping. And just welding these seams together, making it one piece. And I've turned off wireframe just to see the seams a little bit better. Now we're just selecting that shell and flattening them straight. And we selected that shell, and we're going to do a quick peel on it just to relax the UVs and get a little better, less distortion in the UVs. And at this point, I think I was playing around with the idea of straightening it just to kind of see what kind of result we would get with it. And it works out pretty well for this piece, but like with the other pieces, we had a little bit more of a corkscrewing effect going on with them, so I just decided to kind of keep it consistent with the other UV layouts. That way we have some uniformity when we lay out our when we do our final UV layout. So I'm just aligning those shells by selecting the bottom edge and then going to text tools and align. Continue on with the next piece here. I'm gonna reset X forms, convert it to an edible poly, and delete the bottom polygon face that's not going to be visible. And now we're checking for inverted normals. And you can see we had some issues with that, so we're going to address that by going into element mode and flipping the polygon faces. Now we're ready to unwrap. So we're just going to go ahead and do a flatten mapping. Easy for me to say. And we're just welding some seams together. Go ahead and straighten out those shells. Do a quick peel on this. For the most part, this is just a very repetitive thing we're doing here. And we're aligning that shell based on that edge we selected. And then we just did a rescale element, so our UVs are 1:1. Convert that to an editable poly, and we're going to work on the next piece. So we're going to reset X forms, convert to editable poly, check for inverted normals. And it looks like we had the same issue on this one. So we're going to element mode and flip those polygon faces. Then we're going to delete that bottom face that's not going to be visible. And it looks like here I had a problem with not setting up our. We selected polygon. And then our UVs were not updating in our unwrap modifier, so I'm clicking the top of the stack so that I can select the polygons in the unwrap modifier. So we're just welding some more seams. This one's pretty straightforward. Straightening out those UV shells. Doing a quick peel on those. And just aligning those shells. And rescale elements. So we get a 1:1 texture resolution for that piece. Alright, and we're continuing on with the next piece. So reset X forms. Then we're going to check for back face culling. And it looks like we have another issue with the normals being inverted, so we're going to flip those polygon faces. flat mapping that piece. And we're going to weld up some of these seams. And you can see I'm working out of the perspective to do that. It's a lot easier than working out of the UV editor. And we're going to go ahead and straighten that piece. It looks like we had a piece that we didn't want welded, so I'm going to go ahead and select that edge and break it. And then grab that UV shell and straighten it. And then, let's see. So that was a polygon that we hadn't deleted before unwrapping. So we're just going to go ahead and unwrap the rest of the pieces and then delete that afterwards. Looks like our width of those pieces were a little off, so we're just addressing that. So we're going to use a vertical line to make sure those two edges are symmetrical to one another. And then just do a quick peel on these pieces. So we're just going ahead and align that piece using text tools. We just did a rescale elements and just looking over the checkerboard pattern and seeing if we have any distortion. And we're just going to go close out of the UV editor and delete that polygon that we don't need. Okay, this is where the audio picks up again, so we'll just continue on with me talking in the video for this next part. Alright, let's continue on here. Let's go ahead and jump to these bands here. I'm going to go ahead and isolate them. Looks like they're one piece. Let's first start by deleting some of the geometry we don't need, these inner faces. So I'm going to go in here and select just the edge, and we're going to select these edges to build a selection. So if I select those edges now, come over here and hit ring. I've got a ring selection of edges, and then I can convert that to polygon faces and just go ahead and easily delete those. Alright, and let's double check here. Yeah, we need those faces in between. Okay. So now what we want to do is just go ahead and reset X-forms, convert to editable poly, and check for backface culling. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And let's start unwrapping this. So let's go ahead and throw an unwrap modifier on here. Let's grab all these faces and do a flat mapping. Okay, so we're left with a bunch of pieces. So we'll go ahead and just attack these individually. So the first thing I want to do is just make these into strips. So I'm going to go ahead and go into edge mode, and I'm going to go ahead and make our seams right here like that. We'll do that for each of these pieces. So I'll go ahead and just break it like that. Come over here, make a break. Yeah, getting twisted around there. Should get that matte to a hotkey. Okay. basically breaking these into two different pieces. That way we can utilize more of our texture space. Okay, so those are broken. So what we can do is should be able to just select all these pieces at an element level, like so. Got this one over here, and just do I did that on edge, so we got to go back and select it on our face selection. That's pretty easy. And let's straighten selection. Okay, let's move these guys. Let's go ahead and grab all those and just say pack together. It's a lot of pieces. Let's see what's going on with this. That one doesn't look correct. Go ahead and undo. Let's see. Let's locate what that piece is first. So it's this guy here. It did do that. Interesting. It's like it's just stretched out more than the other pieces. So we can adjust that by just bringing it in. I'm not sure why Max does that. It's just Max is being, you know, just a pain in the ass sometimes. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our checkerboard pattern on here. Those look pretty good. So I'm going to turn off wireframe by hitting F4, and let's kind of weld some of these seams together here. So I think I'll make, let's just kind of weld everything and just leave one seam. So maybe we'll just leave that seam right there. And it looks like it's pretty consistent on all these pieces, so the video is about to get a little Cloverfield on you, like moving around the viewport. Apologize for that. Okay, just welding up some of these seams. And again, we're making this kind of our seam line consistent along these pieces. And it kind of gets a little hard to see the seam line, so you can just turn your checkerboard off. Let's see if I think if I just close my UV editor and bring that back up, I should get rid of the checkerboard. Yep. That's interesting. Okay. Alright, getting there. So now we're left with these strips. Let's go ahead and just go into element mode here and pack these together to organize them a little better, like that. And then we'll just go ahead and run our flatten mapping on these pieces. Or sorry, straighten selection. Keep saying flatten mapping. Straighten these guys out. And let's check for uniformity in the texture. Let's go ahead and, since the scale of the checkerboard's a little high, let's put on our material we created. That looks pretty good. I think we'll be okay with that. So that's going to be that piece, and these are all kind of aligned pretty well. So I'm going to convert this to an editable poly now, and now we're just left with this piece. Now we could, in theory, we're not going to, but you could mirror this side over here. And actually, let me think about this. We don't need those faces on there. They're not going to be seen, so we can remove them. So just disregard what I was saying there. And let's go ahead and grab these. we're deleting these faces. It wasn't letting me delete for some reason there. Okay. So one other thing too is, if you remember correctly, when we were kind of fixing this area for our high poly mesh, we added this edge loop so that we could get a nice straight edge here. This isn't really necessary to have for our low poly mesh, so we can just go ahead and remove these edges here. So control backspace will do that, and then we're left with a little cleaner topology in that area. And you can go in vertex mode, just double check that you don't have any vertex along that line. So control backspace removes edges and vertices. Alright, so we got that piece good. So next thing we want to do is reset our X-forms. And let's turn on backface culling. That looks good. Let's throw an unwrap modifier on here. And flatten map. Okay, so a little bit of cleanup. Let's turn our wireframe off and just kind of visually see these seams, go through and stitch them together. Okay, and then we have these inner pieces, and it looks like the way that the flat mapping worked, it kind of broke them up into the shells that we want to use. This is that bottom piece there. So I'm going to go ahead and see if we can just, instead of running a straighten map or straighten selection on this, I'm going to see if we can use the align feature to straighten that. And it looks like there's still some wonkiness to it, so we're probably just going to want to straighten those. So I'll just go ahead and click in element mode, make sure we're in face, and straighten selection. Do the same for this. And that one produced some not so good results. So one thing we could also do is let's go to element mode, grab this edge, align it, and that actually aligned it pretty well. I don't even think we need to straighten it. Yeah, that did pretty well. This could be rotated maybe on its side to match that width we have going on there. And we have this piece here, which is just the top. Okay, so that should be good. Let's go ahead and rescale elements. Let's check our checkerboard pattern. Everything looks pretty good. Yep. All right, so that's going to be all of our pieces unwrapped now. And in the next video, we are going to lay out all these UVs into the 0 to 1 space and address some of the mirroring things we did there. So we'll do all that in the next video.